Hi, this is Norm Miller. This is MSRE 508 Valuation, Class 1, Part 2, and the last part for today's class. I'm going to review appraisal designations, uses and definitions, and career paths. With respect to designations, the Appraisal Institute tends to be the currently dominant organization in the United States, and it provides the MAI, or Member of the Appraisal Institute designation. This is the highest level of professional designation possible in appraisal. It includes 4 courses, an experience requirement that is significant and requires a lot of documentation, comprehensive reports, and an exam. There's also the real property analyst and the SRA senior residential appraiser designations. We have another organization, one out of the UK, which also does provide memberships that are used in the United States. It's the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, surveyors being what they call appraisers in England, and they provide the FRIX designation, Fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Next, there's state level designations that require both experience and a license type of certification. There's a residential certification that requires a license test that is passed at the state level. I don't believe there's any experience requirement for that one, but there is significant experience requirement for the general certification, 2,000 hours or so, perhaps a little bit more than that, plus a general exam. These are becoming more recognized. The general certification is starting to replace the requirement of having an MAI in some cases, so the general certification is respected, especially because of the hours of experience that are required before you can get that designation. So that would really be the target minimum designation for somebody who was working in appraisal. If they were working only in residential, then the SRA, and if they're going to be working in commercial, the MAI and maybe the FRICS as well. Regulation of appraisers is done at both the state level and also if you are certified at the state level, either residential or general, then you're required to follow UsePAAS. UsePAAS stands for the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. What's covered in UsePAAS is the type of market research, verification, analysis that you have to do, and also the fact that you're not permitted to overly speculate in your report. A website for UsePAAS is provided here, and you can actually download the entire book. It's a 400-page book. It includes formats and definitions. I mentioned, talk about a straitjacket. There's a lot of conditions in UsePAAS, and I really doubt that many appraisers know everything that's contained in this 400-page book. But let me cover some of the key items that are important and relevant. Most important with UsePAAS, you should know it covers the entire profession of appraisal. The major expectation of UsePAAS is disclosure. Disclosing conflicts of interest that you might have, disclosing your experience level and whether or not you are ready to do the type of appraisal you're undertaking. Typically an appraiser would work with somebody else until they became experienced enough to work on their own. We have kind of an apprentice-based industry system out there. But UsePAAS requires disclosure, what you know, don't know, what's new. It has 2 main pillars or objectives: to promote and maintain a high level of public trust, and secondly, to provide meaningful communication that's not misleading. So again, UsePAAS is a requirement of certified appraisers and it does require a fair amount of conditions, limitations, disclosure on experience. I really think that UsePAAS has not necessarily followed that closely by a number of the appraisers out there. They often do have conflicts of interest. As an example, a residential appraiser may feel pressure to justify a certain number, or else they're not going to get another job, and that's a conflict of interest. But nevertheless, it's an important part of the industry that you should know about. The uses of appraisal vary, but probably the most important one is financing. Next would be taxation, property tax assessments or estate taxation. Eminent domain, when property is taken for public purposes out of the private market, it has to be done at fair value or fair market value. That is another important appraisal use. We also would need appraisals when we do appraisal value updates. Say you have a portfolio and you want to update all the values in the portfolio so that you can estimate what the rate of return has been. And of course there's other reasons for appraisal: litigation, disputes between parties, splitting up interest. The question, does the use of the appraisal affect the type of value sought? And the answer is yes. You may want an investment value or an insurable value for a different purpose, and that would affect the kind of value sought. And because of this, we may have a number of definitions of value that we would use. As an example, we could be going after an investment value, and if an investor approached you and they say, I want to know what that property is worth to me, you would look at it from their point of view and their circumstances and their risk preferences and their access to capital, and do they have an adjoining property, and all the things that are unique to them that could affect value. That's totally different from a fair market value or a time targeted value or an auction value or an insurable value or replacement value. The most common type of value we go after is fair market value. And here's a definition for you. The highest price a buyer will pay with available market information, no duress, that means no pressure, and full disclosure of material facts. It doesn't mean perfect information, but full disclosure of material facts, with normal or typical financing to a willing seller, not under duress, with available market information. Again, not perfect information, but full information. You should see the Appraisal Institute book as well, but this is a reasonable definition for fair market value. And you're going to find that all definitions of fair market value assume normality, most probable, no duress, full information. Again, not perfect. You might also see fair value with the word market left out. And you're going to see that used sometimes within accounting definitions of value. And they're trying to come up with a marketable value estimate, typically for book value purposes in accounting. And they avoid the word market for liability reasons, because the Appraisal Institute is viewed as providing a definition of fair market value, and sometimes people are doing valuation, but they don't want to claim that they are full-time in the business of appraisal. We have other types of values that are pretty common. There's a market value opinion and a BPO, broker's price opinion. This is pretty much when somebody who's experienced in buying and selling on behalf of others, or acting as a broker, familiar with the market. It's what they think the property would bring with normal time on the market. It could be done by an appraiser, but it's often done by people that are actually intermediaries or brokers in the market. Turns out that BPOs are pretty good. If you get a broker who really does work in a specific submarket or neighborhood, they're pretty good at coming up with an estimate of value. And the reason to use a BPO is because it's about 1/3 the cost of a typical appraisal, sometimes even less. It does not have as much documentation behind it, but it should have a fair amount of information, again, if it's somebody who's experienced in the market. Another key definition, and you should review these in the Appraisal Institute book as well, investment value is value to an individual organization as opposed to the typical individual, the typical organization. So you are allowed to consider their unique circumstances, their tax situations, their risk preferences, their access to money, motivation, and so forth. One more that you're not going to find in the Appraisal Institute book is constant liquidity value, or time-targeted price. This is a value estimate that uses the current information on the inventory available of similar property for sale. I added the word similar just now. And it compares time on the market to price achieved, so that you can do an algorithm to estimate how much discount you need to sell faster than normal. So it could be that homes are selling in a particular neighborhood at a typical rate of requiring 4 months. And it could be that there's normal inventory. Maybe there are 4 to 6 months of inventory on the market right now of similar homes. If somebody said, I want to know what this home is worth based on a time-targeted selling period of 30 to 60 days, you're going to have to discount it a little bit to sell it faster. And so it is possible to estimate the trade-off in time on the market with price discounts and to come up with values that you could refer to again as a time-targeted price. We also have the term constant liquidity, where we hold that time target constant over time, and it could be that the values go up and down over time with market conditions. But it considers the fact that in some markets it takes a long time to sell property, in some markets it is quick. We also have insurable value. Typically here we're going after replacement cost of the building and ignoring land, and it's really just the buildings that we're valuing here. So again, the use of the appraisal does affect the type of definition that we're going to use in terms of the value sought. Let me talk a little bit about appraisal career paths. We tend to specialize in the appraisal industry. People specialize in residential. Typically, financing dominates there. And in the residential appraisal industry, AVMs, or automated valuation models, are really the future. That would make it a risky segment to go into as a career path unless you are automating and adopting interactive AVMs with inspections so that you can appraise faster and more efficiently, because that's what it's going to take to succeed in residential appraisal, to be able to do it quickly and efficiently in the future, because AVMs do a pretty good job on appraising property, and they're objective, they're not biased, and that's why they're so valuable. Even if their error is just a little bit higher than a good manual appraisal, when they're done with interactive, on an interactive basis, that is where the appraiser directs the comps and the market and the definitions, they do just as well there, and they can be done faster. So AVMs are really the future of the industry with respect to residential. In terms of commercial, there's specialization by property type: multifamily, office, biotech, nanotech, industrial, retail, land. And you could specialize in service parking lots, or warehouses, or golf courses, or amusement parks. And when you have specializations in unique property, you tend to appraise all over the country on that kind of property, because there's not that many people that might have that same expertise. So there is nothing wrong with specialization, and in fact it's a good way to go here. I should also note that one of the career paths for senior appraisers is consulting. MAIs with the CRE designation, Counselor of Real Estate, or the CCIM designation, they often do consulting, and they might work on value separation, valuing interest, feasibility studies, pricing studies, leasehold interest valuation, sublease interest valuation, updating portfolio values, and they also might work as an expert in litigation. That's probably the most lucrative area of valuation expertise, and we find a lot of your senior appraisers do that. Before the next class, please read over the highest and best use material and the traditional methodologies of appraisal or valuation, and work on finding a property to appraise. And don't pick a property where you have a conflict of interest. That would be a violation of UsePAAS, even though you may not be certified. Let's avoid that conflict anyway. And thank you.